Okay, I think we are live. So I doubt anybody's watching us live tonight, considering it is the presidential debate. So sorry for that, Angela, with your your timing, but most of our viewers are on YouTube anyway afterwards. So um, hello to everyone, and you can see three faces here, which is unusual. But we have Raquel back from Brazil. Oh, it shows the opposite. So we have Raquel back from Brazil. I can't, Vanna White, your job is safe, so I'm not coming for it. And we have our new guest. So, Dr. Angela Buckley, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. And I realize that it is the presidential debate. So, for everyone who catches up with us later, thank you. I have been working in manufacturing now for 25 years. And I started out as an engineer. And one of the big learnings in my master's research was that it doesn't really matter how well you design your product or your manufacturing processes. If you're not bringing the people along with those changes, you're not going to have a quality product. And that research was done with the big three. It was done internationally. Grateful that I have the language skills to be able to navigate some of that. But then I really spent kind of the majority of my career not only doing process development, but really bringing the people along. And at some point, I took a hard step into training and development, cultural development, that transformational change that's associated with continuous improvement, and really helping organizations reduce their turnover, really work with their hourly workforce so that they can understand what quality looks like. How does safety look like as a sense of culture, not just as a sense of doing or behavior? Like, I think there's a difference. You start stepping up from metrics to behavior to really having a culture first. Um, and then decided that that was so much fun, I should just go pursue a PhD because, I have spare time when I'm working full time and single parenting a child. But,
Well, you have
um,
so much time.
yeah, I have extra time in my day. Um, but my research is in organizational development in education. So the focus on adult education, hourly manufacturing turnover. How do we take training to really develop the culture and to improve the hourly manufacturing workforce's experience? So that's what I've been
Well,
doing.
that's awesome, and I'm so glad you found me. With I do a lot of work on people who transition from blue collar to white collar and how that's a big change. And then Raquel has a lot of experience in the service industry, which is probably technically pink collar, but um, I'm glad that we have this blend of the
Yeah.
different industries.
Yeah.
Um,
So it'll be very fun to have this conversation.
yeah. Raquel, you haven't been here for just the last episode. Is there anything you want to say before we dive in, or do you want to dive in first?
No, we can dive in first. Yeah, I'm just glad to be back.
So, Angela, you had reached out to me to talk about KPIs
Yes.
and unwritten rules.
Yes.
And when I got your message, I chuckled because I currently have a client
Okay.
who I was looking at some of their climate assessment that they were thinking of rolling out, and they wanted me to look at it. And I asked them, I was like, so these answer options that you have, where did you get them from? And she was like, that's the problem I'm running into. That's why I wanted you to look at it, because we're guessing, like nobody really knows what answers they're going to select. And it was about a KPI metric. It was about
Really?
looking at, well, one of their KPIs, we'll say it's engagement, right? I don't want to disclose too much, but
Common. That's a
and then like,
common
what are these?
KPI.
It was like asking, it's supposed to ask supervisors, how do you measure engagement? It was like all of these different options that they were presenting that just had a weird feeling to me. Like they were very verbose and kind of double barreled. And I was like, where did these come from? She's like, well, there are so many different divisions that we're not sure how we're trying to capture everything. We're not sure how to do it. And I just kept probing, and I was like, wait, do all of these people working on this, do they even know what a KPI is? And that's where she was like, I don't think so. She was like, I don't think so, because that is I learned that word from marketers.
Oh,
Key
okay.
performance indicator.
Mhm.
Yep.
I had always called them like in psychology, we usually refer to them as criteria.
There is criteria. Yes, that's right. I think some
So,
slightly different. So you have metrics, criteria, KPI,
which different
KAI.
milestones, deliverables, objectives. So like they can get all confused. And this person, so that was where we had to start, was even just assumptions around, I wouldn't call unwritten rules, but assumptions around that what a KPI is.
Yeah.
And everybody was afraid to say it. And it sounds like you and I even have different ideas of what a KPI is. So I just thought it was funny when you brought it up. And so I'm eager to hear what you have to say about unwritten rules and KPIs.
So I think our part of the conversation was about also using KPIs to establish like the new culture that you're going towards. So I'm a firm believer of what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
But then the conversation so much centers around what's happening in the background that's maybe getting measured, but not officially. And then what are the KPIs that you use when you want to really change a culture? So the automotive industry, I'll give a 20-year-old example. I was thinking of safe examples I could share. When the seatbelt laws came in, the automotive industry, the big three, was really instrumental working together with the insurance companies to enforce seatbelt laws. And they weren't popular because many people thought that their private space was being invaded. Right. So there was resistance to the seatbelt laws when they were first coming in. And even today, I have to catch my mom and say, listen, seatbelt, it's for your own safety,
I
right?
had a stepfather who was like,
Very
he
against
very much thought it was encroaching on his personal freedom.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All the men that were working with me, ladies also somewhat, but they were not as resistant to this. But the automotive industry said, listen, we make cars for a living. We have seen the statistics, and we are going to try to encourage our employees to be wearing seatbelts. And so twice a year, there would be these audits when you drove into the parking lot. There would be managers, high level managers, marking down the number of percentages of people wearing seatbelts. And so there was an entire campaign that was really built around safety on and off the work site as greater understanding of statistics and safety metrics came into being. And it took years, like it literally took years of focused training and development and coaching and reinforcement, positive and sometimes socially like peer pressure, to get people to wear seatbelts. Right. And so, but it's interesting because now I have a teenager and he's 16 and he will not get in a car without a seatbelt. Like it is so programmed into his body.
It's normal for his age.
It is absolutely normal. He has grown up 100% seatbelt. There's no argument about it. Right. And so sometimes these cultural things change because we measured them, and sometimes they change because we let the next generation come into it.
Yes. And so I hear people say a lot, we just have to wait for the boomers to die off about anything with culture change. Because I do so much culture change, and every time I'm like, what a depressing view of humanity. Like this, people are so resistant to change that you're just waiting for a generational shift. And like, I get the truth in it. And yet I also like, just can't let that be my whole world view.
I can't let that be my whole world view. And yet there's an element of pragmatism in that statement. So.
Yeah, it's fair. I think
Um,
so. I'm of the age where it was smoking that was the big thing
okay.
that people were fighting against when I was growing up. And now, like, I go to
Nobody's,
Europe and I'm
yeah,
like,
like,
why are they
yeah,
Yeah.
smoking? You know?
yeah.
That's also a thing, right? But that was a business. I was just trying to like use a business metric, right? Of how did they go and try to really drive their employees to be early adopters of
Mm-hmm.
a safety metric. And then when you look at heavy manufacturing, there are the top 9 that are generally recognized by the Department of Labor for highest safety incidents, right? And because they are non-standard work, they are complicated work. Those are the types of things, and then just the sheer physics, the weight of the machinery that's involved. That if something goes wrong, it's not like you just dropped a book on your toe, right? Like
Right.
these are major things. So those types of industries, they will have meetings, stand-up morning meetings every single day to review the work and what the KPIs for that day will be, including the safety metrics. And you will have regular on-site manufacturing reviews in order to keep those people safe. And you can tell when you walk in. One of my professors I used to work with had like he would have personal assessment KPIs, and one of his was when you walk around and you see all of the stanchions, right? The things that keep you from running a fork truck into the wall or a
Mhm.
power box or something. He's like, if
Mm-hmm.
the stanchions are clean and not dented and damaged, they probably have a pretty good safety culture
Mm-hmm.
that they're practicing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the words and not the paper on the wall, but actually
Yes.
practicing. And so he had always like this pocket full of things that he was looking for that weren't on the wall. So he could like assess, okay, but is this really a safety culture or is this safety wallpaper?
Or yeah, or has just nobody died yet? Yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yet. Right. Yet. So I think there's an opportunity to like understand what are you looking at and what are you looking for and how does that communication roll down not just from the top. Like it's easy to set those metrics. It's
Mm-hmm.
harder to live the metrics.
Yeah.
And when we talk about that, what are we giving up? Right? Like if you say I have to really take a little more time in order to meet the quality or the safety metric, are you going to give up productivity or are you going to give up finances, right? Like what
Mhm.
your ROI is on the time. Usually that is not what happens, right? And there's a change process. Just like you would talk about when you have a team, you would talk about like storming, whatever, forming, norming, storming, performing. I always say those are in the wrong order. They rhyme, so it's so hard to get them in the
Right.
right order. But similar, when you have new metrics, you have to actually give a little flex in the, let's say, competing metrics while the other ones get better, right? So there's no reason why you can't have safety and quality and productivity. You can, but as you introduce new safety things, you might have a little squish here. The opportunity is that you get better on your safety so that you get back to your standards, but you have to
Right.
plan for that. And I think a lot of people miss that. And so they say, well, we tried it.
Yeah.
Or there's a counterculture and there's a pushback because traditionally you are only measured by one thing, and that one thing is units out the door. And
Yeah.
if that productivity number is the only thing that is brought into your review, if it's the only thing that's impacting your quarterly bonus, the other metrics are just shadows.
Yeah, and I think that it's funny because Anna and I talk about this a lot, right? Like that it's not just the one thing. We are a whole being, right? You're speaking and from a service perspective, from a hotel perspective, right? You're talking about safety and speed and all of that. think about how the housekeepers have to clean rooms, right?
Yes.
So they come in and they have to uh, strip a room, right? So they come in, they take all the linen out, and then they have to change it. They have to clean the bathroom. They have to clean all of it, right? So what is happening now is that the travelers have become different. There's a lot of new travelers that um, just age, right? Like they are new. I used to work in a hotel that I've never actually, but and it was right after the pandemic or like at the end of it that people are like, oh, this is the first time I'm traveling. And I'm like, ever by themselves, right? Because it's the new generation who has never traveled before. And then now they're coming, right? And you have your seasoned travelers, you have the people who haven't traveled in a while. And the expectations are different. The hotels are trying to recover money that they lost during the pandemic. So there's a lot to unpack on that, which that's where I'm going with this. But there's a push to get these rooms ready, right? Because people are very impatient now. Like they don't understand if check-in's at 3, that means that your room will be ready after 3, not
Right.
at 10 a.m. when you arrived. And if your room is not, if you arrive at 10 a.m. and you have to wait until 3, we're not late in getting you a room. You just got here a lot earlier, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
they don't understand that. And it's interesting because people will come to me and was like, but well, I think it was like, you don't understand the whole process that goes behind it, right? So, for example, if you want a specific room, right, that is facing this way, that is near somebody else, or if you want an upgraded room, that housekeeper doesn't have just you. I'm not going to take a housekeeper that's on a 20th floor to clean a 5th floor room because
Right.
there's travel time and there's a lot of things that will impact the other guests and all of that. And you don't want to rush them because when you rush them, one, they hurt. The amount of ladies that hurt, and I say ladies because it is the vast
Mhm.
majority of housekeepers are
Yep.
females, hurt their backs,
Yep.
hurt their hands because those mattresses,
Yeah.
they're
They're
not
not.
light. And
Yeah.
they have to lift the mattress to, tuck it in. And of course, we do training on how to do it. But if you have a supervisor on your ass telling you, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go, they're not gonna do it. They're not gonna bend properly. They're not gonna do it. That's just not doable. And the room is not going to be as clean as you would like to. So what's going to happen? The guest is going to complain that the room is not clean. So you were saying, right? Like when you prioritize something, you need to understand there's going to have some wiggle room for the other parts, right? So yeah, your room will be immaculate if you give us time, but people don't want time. People don't want to give you time. They don't want to hire more people. Before, when I started, which was over 17, 18 years ago, housekeepers used to work in pairs.
Yes.
You have 2 housekeepers per room. The rooms are going to be ready on time. They're going to be ready. They're going to be clean. And the
And they
ladies
were
are not
safe.
going to get hurt. Yeah.
They were safe because they were never alone.
Yeah. Now these ladies have an obscene amount of rooms to clean. They have to make their standard. They have to make their time. And it's not doable. Right. And it is just getting worse. That's what it is. Same thing for front desk agents, right? You have less people working, you have a higher volume of guests, higher volume of responsibilities because there are jobs that no longer exist, such as a lot of hotels no longer have a phone operator. And they say, well, you have a phone tree. I was like, but everybody press 0. Everybody presses 0. Like, so now you have front desk agent answering the phone, talking to the guests, getting complaints, pre-regging this, doing that. So there is this the workload just got so much bigger and then so much larger, and then you're not giving them the tools, right? So the burnout, and because safety is not just physical safety, right? Our mental safety, our mental security, that we're going to be okay. The amount of people, the turnover is just, front desk of hotels has always been the highest turnover of anything in service industry
Okay.
ever. Like for as long as I said, for 18 years, it's the one thing that they can't understand why. And I always said, because these people are standing on their feet for 8 hours of a day. They're getting yelled at, right? They don't have the support. Um, it's it's exhausting, right? Like it's a lot. And so what are the companies, for example, in this case, like hotels, right? What are they willing to sacrifice in order to get their employees, to make sure that their employees are okay, to make sure that the team is okay, to make sure that the culture is not just, as you said, like just spoken of, but actually practiced. And the
Right.
one thing that you mentioned also, I think it was on the email that I saw, that you, how is the KPI for, when you do it for your guests and for your product is different from your associates, right? So
Yeah.
a great thing, if you walk in the back of the house of any luxury hotel, I can promise you is nowhere near of what they expect the employees to perform on the other side.
Right.
It smells bad. It's old. No, it's true. It smells bad. It's dirty. It's dingy. It's dungy. It's it's not good. And I've told them, like, how do you expect people to provide luxury when they don't have luxury? These people come from really low income backgrounds. They don't know what luxury is. You need to provide that for them, and not as a not making them understand or making them serve as something different that they don't understand. You say, okay, here, I
That they've never experienced.
never experienced. And there, so I mentioned this before, but I'm vegan, right? And one time I was at most hotels, large capacity, they have cafeterias. And one time one of the general managers was very pompous, and he was, it's a very luxury brand. And he said to me, he's like, oh, I order food, right? Because the food in the cafeteria, everything had butter, or the lettuce was like completely terrible. It was just bad, right? Looked bad. Everything was just terrible. Everything cross contaminated. There's cheese on the chickpeas. There's like everything, right? And he's like, why do we have a great cafeteria? I was like, yeah, but I can't eat there because, I don't know if I'm able to eat. And he looks at me, he says, we have salad. I look at it, was like, is that exactly how you would talk to a guest that's paying, $500 a night? And he tells you, I'm vegan. And you say, well, we have great salad. Or we just say, let me get the chef to make something for you. Right. So it's that double standard of, like, for our guests, we'll bend over backwards, but for our associates, you take whatever we give you and you don't complain about it.
Right.
So how, you know what I'm saying? And I thought when I read it, I was like, that's true. Like, and I've lived that for many years of such a double standard, right? Like, I expect you to do it, but I won't do it for you at all.
And when we talk about culture, we also talk about engagement. And how disengaging was that conversation for
Right?
you, right?
100%.
And I can tell you that there have been a lot of conversations around salad in the last 20 years, or even salad without bacon bits. Like, they're like, hey, we have salad. And I'm like, but it has bacon.
Right? Like,
I'm
yeah.
allergic to gluten, and often salads aren't safe for me because of croutons.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
And I had an employee coming across, or a consultant, I don't remember his role, but out of plant, and he is also not even gluten intolerant, like he's full on celiac.
Oh, that's dangerous.
It is, but we have a pizza provider here in town who is very dedicated to making celiac friendly pizzas. And the secretary was like, well, I don't believe in all that. Like, the person who typically orders our food for us, she just told me flat out she doesn't believe it. I'm like, we can't not believe allergies. We can't, and you can't assess. Like, it is not your job.
Celiac isn't even an allergy. That is an illness.
It is.
Yeah.
It's right. Like, it's almost disability because it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
debilitating.
Mhm.
And I am always fascinated about how many people have opinions about other people's health, which is nobody's conversation except between you and the doctor. And
Mhm.
so I ordered this pizza that is celiac friendly, and he thanked me later, and he's like, I always go to these places, and right? So there's always this perception that, but I work with 99% men in
Right.
manufacturing. And there's always this perception that it's always the girls, always the ladies, always causing problems. But he was born celiac, so it is what it is. And he's like,
Yeah.
I have never been able to eat pizza. He's like, I have
Oh,
never had a pizza. That was his first
That's
pizza
so awesome.
in his life at like age 22 or 23 or something. Like he was young, just out of college. He's like, I couldn't eat pizza in college with my friends. I couldn't eat pizza in high school. All my friends would have all these things and I would have to eat over here by myself. He's like, this was the first time I ate pizza.
That's so
if
awesome.
food is not accessible, it is really hard to feel like you belong. And a
100%.
lot of places do not have accessible food.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
the
they talk
judgment,
about how that's a
again.
recent thing, but we don't talk about all the shifts. That's another organizational level, all the shifts in what people like. We use a different wheat than most of the world does because it's cheaper, right? Like there's been shifts in what goes into our food. And there's been shifts in medical research and awareness of like, just because your grandparents didn't know they were celiac doesn't mean that that undiagnosed health issue they had constantly wasn't a
Or that they
problem.
died at 54 and didn't need
Right.
to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or the kids that choked on peanuts.
Right.
They
Yeah.
choked on peanut. No,
They
he
didn't
didn't.
choke. Their throat
He had
closed.
an allergy. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
people, yeah. And not
Yeah.
just that, right? Like, just like nowadays, we are no longer born with our wisdom tooth. Like younger generations, they don't have wisdom tooth because that's evolution. Oh yeah, younger generations don't. They're no longer
Oh,
born
I had to
with
have mine
wisdom
pulled.
tooth.
But there are some
There are
people have
some.
some people have fewer. Like
You
it
no
is,
longer
there
have
are
it. Yeah.
fewer.
That's
And that
cool.
is because our jaw is getting smaller
We've
because we're
lost
no
our
longer.
wisdom. I'm just kidding.
So
They pulled mine.
a lot
So
of the newer generations don't have it, right? So and I know this, my mom is a professor, she's a dentist professor, and she has said that for many years now that they are losing it, right? Like I just didn't read something off the
Oh,
internet.
I believe you. I just
No, I'm not saying it for you. I'm saying it like for our
for the
audience.
for the next
Yes,
TikTok commenter who's
that-
like,
yes,
she's crazy.
that I did not read a random, like, no, this is a legit thing. And
So I'm
I think
interested
we
for
develop different allergies, right? We are
Mhm.
way more, like, we introduced to different food allergens now. We are introduced to, like, the amount of chemicals on our food and our water and our air. Yeah, people are going to have different conditions that they had 50, 70 years ago. It's just how it is.
yeah, and that's I mean that is also a safety concern at work as well. So I'm curious for both of you. You both brought up um, what you're measuring versus and with safety, and you've both talked about measuring different things for staff versus clients or guests or what what do you think, and I know there's always a both, but what do you think drives the why they're not measuring what they're actually making decisions based off of are they selecting the wrong KPIs because they don't know, or is that just the KPIs that they feel like they have to, or what's your take on it? You know, Angela, you brought up having a culture of safety versus
safety behavior.
right, nothing's happened yet, right?
So first of all, if you're familiar like with the 5 behaviors from Lencioni, and you talk about building that trust and getting some accountability, and you kind of roll up to some metrics and results, there has to be an alignment to what those metrics are, and then that holding people accountable for that. And a lot of times metrics are handed down.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't workshopping the metrics and asking what makes sense for your facility, because what we want to do, if we're talking safety, right, what we want to do is make sure that we have the right metric for the right safety behavior, which is different. When you're at the pool, you'll hear every lifeguard blow their whistle and say no running to the kids, right? We need to walk safely where there is water on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
In some facilities, we actually shut the doors in winter, like they'll lock because they have ice potential, and it's too dangerous to go out those doors in winter.
Mm.
Right? So it's there's literally a safety incident associated with ice in that facility. So those doors get locked so that nobody's injured in the winter. And yet there's still, all of the fire codes are still being met, right? Like you still have to have escapes. But it's important to understand that you're measuring the right thing. Frankly, I don't care if you go out that door in the summer. Right. So what's the metric that we're looking at? What are we looking at from the past history, and what can we do? So many of the facilities, because fork truck becomes an issue, they measure fork truck human interactions. And many of the facilities now are moving to completely designing fork truck traffic away from any of the human foot traffic. And it used to be that we were all walking pale mail, like everybody was all free for all down the same aisle. Then we had pedestrian aisleways. Then we had fork truck traffic and pedestrian. And now, ideally, you have tuggers coming in and pedestrians in the center. And you don't, right? Like, as time goes on, as metrics are understood, as we design, we go through a continuous improvement, and we improve our human powered vehicle interactions, we can make it safer for the humans, but we can also design all of those interactions out. But
Yeah,
you
we should
can't,
take the data and make improvements.
it's following the data, but every single site has different data. And so you have to start with a full-scale conversation at that facility, not at corporate, that just says no more accidents. And you have to have a budget to like get there, right? Like, what's
Yes.
the budget? So now you're going to give me a metric to achieve, but are you going to give me the hours and the budget to achieve them? Because it's going to take training, and it's going to take change training, right? Not just educational training. That's different,
Yeah.
because you have to unlearn a behavior,
You have to have that everybody to buy into the new system too. Yeah, because
right?
otherwise,
So you have to unlearn, learn, and then freeze the new behavior, right? Like if you want to do Erin's original baby change management model. But that takes time. Like, we know that habits minimum 30 days to start forming habits. And I'm going to just tell you that when there's like big social groups, it's longer than
Way
30 days,
longer.
right? Like, it's 30
As
days when
long
I
as
want
it's as
to.
long as the weakest link.
Right,
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so that support, that budget, like, it is not enough to just magically assign a number. Culture happens when everybody's on board. Culture happens when there's the behavior and the alignment, and the people on the floor have the skills and the sense of empowerment to speak up, right? Like, there's an element of cultural safety or psychological safety with reporting something
Yes.
and making it. In one facility, when I started there, they didn't have like a quick way of reporting a safety hazard. Nothing had happened yet, right? But there was no way to report that. They only had one document. It was 14 pages, and it was an incident report. Well, no one reports 14 pages for something that hasn't happened yet. It's too much work. So we created an app that they could quickly take a picture with their phone, put the marker, like, so all of our stanchions are numbered so that you basically have a grid. So you would know, like, L42, go to that place, and you would know where this,
Oh, smart. Yeah.
right? Like, all plants have that. So think latitude and longitude in a plant. But so you could tell them the location, you could describe the problem, and then you could quickly take a picture. And then that went into a database, and now you have very quick access. And we created a dashboard, red, yellow, green, budgets, etc. And you could assign those out from that dashboard. It was a project management tool that it fed into. But every single hourly person had access to that. In fact, I could like go still today, because it's a public link. You could go put in your report and report it. So
That's great.
that completely changed the culture in that facility, because for the first time, those people felt like their voices were heard, and they took action, right?
And they
Like the
weren't
plant
penalized
manager,
for doing the positive behavior with
plant
14 people.
manager said, we will take action. I don't want to see 300 incident reports. I
Right.
want to see what's your plan to get them done. Like our
Mhm.
meetings are going to be the conversations of what's the most important that has to be done, what's the most expensive that I have to figure out how to budget because it's a real thing, and what are you doing to get the rest of them off the plate, right? I don't want to see them. I want you responding to them. If they're easy things, 2 days. If it's a bigger thing, 5 days. If it's a budgeting thing, I want it in front of my CFO or accountant by the end of the week, right? Like we need to have those budgets. So like he put priority on making sure that people responded and people were permitted, like they were permitted. And don't get me wrong, there were some things where we're like, thank you. I understand that this one was blue and it's supposed to be yellow. It goes to
But
the
yeah,
bottom of the pile
Right.
today,
There's
right?
always
yeah,
that.
There's always something, right? But we had it.
Mhm.
And it mattered, right? And so like understanding how important it is to really get involved. I think of it as servant leadership. What is that obstacle? What is stopping them from feeling empowered? And then measuring how you get over that obstacle. That's like the KAI that is inhibiting you from reaching your KPI. And that is when you start really being successful in changing culture. But
yeah,
you have to sit there and listen and understand what that problem is
You have to
first.
start with the inductive, right? Because I'm thinking of all that data you're getting in that app that is probably showing you themes to make KPIs that leadership had no idea was an issue, right? And this builds trust between leadership and the staff because if leadership's telling you to, and you're like, yeah, cool, that isn't a problem,
Right.
right? All of this is a problem, and you don't care. So then I feel like that also creates a culture then of being like, I'm not going to do it because it's stupid,
yeah.
right?
Right.
And
So
that
I've been
then
in facilities
really
where
gets
they
hurt.
could report it, but no one did anything about it. So then it's
Why
just a
would you,
gripe
right?
mode, right? Like
Exactly.
it's not just did you report it, it's did you take action on it? And that requires
Mhm.
budget and commitment.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's all the way up and down the chain. And also like a little honest communication. Like even during my research review for my PhD, there was active conversation about why those people felt empowered, different company, right? But they felt empowered because when there was a safety issue, they could go directly to their plant manager and he said, thank you, I hear you. If it was something that he could do like immediately, he's literally been known to like drive across the state to get a part that was missing so that they
Wow.
could get back up and running and be safe. And if it was something that was like greater, he's like, I have to put that in next quarter's budget. But there was transparency, there was
Right.
accountability, and there was
It's not
transparency.
just that you didn't hear from them for 3 months.
Exactly. And so they always talked about their pizza meetings. So back to our fun food conversation. But they felt that their voices were heard. And when they were struggling, they knew why there was a struggle, right? Like they knew what the limits were. They knew what was happening that was going to be an issue. And maybe they had to like find a short-term workaround, a medium-term workaround until they could really get the budget. It's a very heavy industry. So sometimes solutions take 2 years to
Yeah.
actually put in place. But
So
having a conversation matters. Transparency matters.
talking about two things that Raquel and I talk about a lot is one, we talk about how people think that if there's a change or if you listen to the employee, it's all going to be chaos, right? It's just going to be like if you let your kids run the house as if employees are children. And I already forgot the other one that you talked about. And sorry, it'll come to me later. This is if you've seen any of our episodes. I'm like, oh, hold on, I almost had it. But what was that reflection? Like what was the impact for leadership of that, of having this
So
open
those
culture that people
those
felt
were two excellent examples, right, of great leadership that was open, transparent, and really cared about the productivity as well as the safety.
right? So, but I mean, like, did they lose control? Did the
Are you
company
kidding?
go up in
People like
flames?
them.
Exactly.
Like,
Because
it's not.
The one CEO, he had I'll just tell you how comfortable people were with him, right? And he was like a big kind of stern guy sometimes, but he had wingtips that were steel toes. The men get dress shoes that are steel toes. The women don't. They don't. We haven't gotten that far yet. But so he was out on the shop floor in his steel toes, and one of the hourly employees was like, those aren't steel toes. We have to have steel toes. You know that if you cross that yellow line, you have to have steel toes. And he's like, they're steel toes. And she's like, no, they're not. Those are not steel toes. Those are dress shoes. She stepped on his toes. And he was like, you know what? He laughed and he was like, don't scuff my shoe. But he also was like, good for you for holding your ground and making sure that even the CEO was adhering to the safety rules. Like it matters. And that is exactly what we want to see. Like, if you truly don't believe it, then you need to test it. Like, trust but verify. And he was completely okay. I think he would have preferred it maybe in a different way, but he totally was okay with that. And I think that says a lot about the acceptance and the rapport that he was able to develop with those employees.
He wasn't an insecure dictator.
Not in that situation, no. No, when it came to safety, he was absolutely like, the people know the best about their workspace, and we're gonna do the best that we can to give it to them.
But it's funny, again, that I have a correlation to that, to hotels, right? So one is, I've seen general managers, middle managers say like, yeah, you have to, like, I don't know, you have to dress a certain way, right? Not even on safety, just a very general, you have to dress in a certain way. But then they show up wearing what they say that, well, but I'm not guest facing. It's like, it doesn't matter. If you tell your people that they cannot do something, you also can't do something. If you tell your team that they cannot get coffee from the guest coffee station in the lobby, nobody can, right? So this idea that hourly associates are different than, or if you tell them that they cannot enter, fun fact, which I was thinking about this a few days ago. If you want to understand what is it, elitism, like classism,
elitism.
Yeah, go to a hotel, because go to a
in America. Is it? I feel like it's more so in America, but maybe it's
no. This is everywhere. So
everywhere.
Oh yeah, it gets worse in different countries, but you don't see employees entering the building, because we have our employee entrance, which is usually in an alleyway, which is dirty, which is next to the dumpster. So you walk in smelling like trash. It's horrible. It's dirty. It's just nasty, right? Or it's dangerous because it's dark. But you don't, because they don't want the guests seeing that people who are dressed not nicely, people who maybe don't look like guests should be in that hotel. So again, if the general manager can walk through the front door, then so should everybody be able to walk through the front door. So the places where the people have the GMs have more buy-in from the team is when they do the exact same things as everybody else, right? You were gonna work through the stinky door. I'm gonna work through, because then the door is not stinky, because then they make sure that door is clean, and then just by entering the building through the employee entrance, which GM actually is actively following everything, because it looks different. The food is better, right? Like I gave that example of food, but I have places where I was like, hey, is there any way that they can not cook with butter? And they're like, absolutely, that's such an easy change. Then I could eat all the vegetables. I never asked them to cook something different for me. I just asked them, like, instead of cooking with butter, cook it with oil. Like, I don't understand why it needs to be. And they're like, yeah, that's a simple change. We can do it. And everybody goes it. And then they start doing like meatless Monday.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, to just the listening part, right? Like being involved. But you ask, like about the KPIs, and, if I feel like for hotels, most of them is just like Angela was saying, like they have always been there, right? Like this is how we always measure everything. Back into today, actually, most of people, executive committee bonuses come from retention, employee retention, right? Now, I've worked for a company in the past that in the beginning, that's what it was. Retention was important. And then they realized that retention means nothing. They want engagement. So they switch even our bonuses from retention to engagement, because I can just not fire people, or I can just not hold people accountable if that's going to mess up with my bonus. Or just because they're there doesn't mean that they are doing a good job. It doesn't mean that they're good employees. It doesn't mean that they are part of the culture.
And
Right?
how are they measuring engagement then?
I'm sorry.
How are they measuring engagement? It's one of the hardest metrics.
So they did, of course, like with surveys and everything, but it would also increase everything. For a hotel would be on, of course, the employee surveys, but also guest satisfaction would increase. Because when you engage at work, you perform better your job, but like you do better. So a lot more like TripAdvisor reviews, a lot more like positive ones, as well as just internal ones. Then definitely retention, growth in the company. So there are ways that you can see, right? Participation in meetings, in call offs, like the most engaged your team is, the less they're going to call off, right? Because they're there for each other, the less mistakes they're going to make. So there are ways that we could measure that, but it was a different way. I was like, that makes a lot more sense, because I don't want to just keep people to keep people,
Right.
like you want to keep people because they want to be there, and you
Mhm.
want to make sure that they're happy, that that they're performing. And if you're unhappy, we all know, I ain't performing if I'm unhappy, and that's for sure.
Right.
I'm a great example of that.
So I noticed earlier, Angela, you brought up you didn't use this word, but the cascading, like it should all align, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
the KPIs,
Yep.
the objectives. And I always talk about more the employee life cycle, about like the organizational goals should be informing what jobs you need, what skills you need, how those performance are evaluated, etc. And I like what you said about that. A lot of this comes from the top,
Yeah.
and I think really a lot of this needs to be more of a conversation,
Yes.
because you don't lose power doing that. You gain credibility.
Mm-hmm.
So with the client, in my opinion, and in
Listen,
my
I
experience,
write
That
books
should be
on
your
this topic.
slogan, by the
So
way. I love that. You have to say that again, because I need to write that down. That's pretty good.
I'll have to remember what I said.
you
I think
don't
so.
lose power,
You don't
you
lose power, you gain
gain.
credibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the client that I talked about at the beginning, that they need to have a conversation about what KPIs are, and then they need to talk about how do they measure it. And it's a very broad organization, has very different divisions. And they were like, well, for example, safety here is going to look different than safety there, or engagement here is
Good.
going to look different than
Good.
engagement there. And so what we're doing is we're having like a workshop
Yep.
where we're going to be like, this is the construct, right? And then we're going to facilitate discussions among the divisions about what does the construct look like for you, and helping them make their KPIs, and realizing they're going to be different, but that they are aligning with the
Yes.
goal,
Yes.
instead of their leadership just giving them something generic, because the worry with something generic is that it's not actionable.
Yeah.
It's not actionable.
It,
And
it can be a two-way conversation. It's better if it is.
it absolutely is. And it takes, I think the question is, are you reflecting like the values of the organization? And are the people that are kind of like your middle managers are the ones that are going to really make you successful? Are they buying
Oh,
in? Are they understanding the top level, top brass? Like usually, at least in the organizations I'm dealing with, they are concerned with positioning themselves on Wall Street, right? The organization has to be successful, and the metrics need to meet the investors' needs, whether you're
Mhm.
venture capitalist or otherwise, right? Like you have to be able to understand and communicate at that level for them, but then you have to translate to your middle managers, who in turn have to translate again to
Yes.
your frontline leaders and hourly workers, right? Like this translation, like maybe we should have called this today lost in translation, right? Like if you don't translate from these top level areas and really communicate like the authenticity of why and the transparency of how this affects the overall business,
Mm-hmm.
you've lost, frankly, everybody, right? Like you lose so much in the friction of that conversation. And then you have the negative energy, and negative energy is not productivity, right? Whereas you can really turn it around. You say credibility, but I think it's more than just credibility. I think it's trust. I think it's positive energy. I think it's reinforcement. And once you have all of those things rolling, you turn around one day and you're like, oh, we changed the culture. But
Yeah.
it didn't happen overnight. It's step by step. And every year, let's like adjust this a little bit and see what we can do.
And you know what's wild is that we call that translating a soft skill.
Yes, because
That's
it's
communicating.
hard to teach it though. But it's hard to
It,
teach culture, right? Like culture is behaviors that are ingrained.
Mhm.
And
yes, but I mean the translating the Wall Street to like to
yeah,
your directors, your middle management down on what you need to be able to get to that Wall Street level. That's communication skills.
it is.
That's knowing what you're talking about, and that's knowing your audience. And we just call a lot of that, we call it soft skills translating, or we blame the director or the middle manager for not getting it.
Yeah.
And then there's the reverse of the executives need to be able to do that at that level, which means they need to delegate some down here and let the directors, middle managers, etc., take the reins on some
Yes.
of the other things so
Well,
that
you
they
have to
can.
bring them along as well. Like it's a
Mhm.
training, it's a development tool as well. Like it's
Mhm.
not just did we make the metric? It's do you have a bench, right? Like how deep is your knowledge? So that when we are talking about these translations, so you can see that, so you can have these astute observations.
And maybe you have better ideas of other ways we should improve the measurement,
Right,
because now you know what we're measuring, what
right,
we care about.
right. But you can only have that when you're having those conversations.
Yeah. Because yeah, like, and so many times, like as a middle manager, because I was a middle manager for a while, right? um there was that conversation of like, I'm telling upper management what the team needs, because I am not only am I listening to the team, I'm also listening to the guest. I'm getting the complaints, I am getting the praises, I'm getting all of it, right? And I pass it on. It's like, well, but truly, how many people? I was like, if I get at least 2 people a day complaining about this, it's a problem,
Yeah.
right? Like if I hear every once in a while, it's not. But if it's the same complaint all the time, it's a problem. Be that by a guest, if I hear that a guest complaining about something, if I hear an employee complain about something. And the one thing is, um, once one person complains, one person has a problem, like a worker, right? If they are strong enough and believing that they have a problem, believe me, in 2 days, the entire department is going to have that problem, because
Right.
they're going to convince everybody that that is a problem,
Mhm.
that they are being treated unfairly, that that the management's not looking into it, that they are. And for somebody who is the department head for that, it's very hard because you're very limited. So a lot of times they'll come to me and be like, well, we need to change this. I'm like, I agree, but it's not, and I know it's not going to change. Right now, granted, I'm also a female, which I've learned that sometimes missing that member between my legs can prevent you from having a lot of things get done.
It's real.
Because I'm missing my magic power, I guess, my magic stick right there. But because many times I leave, they hire a male to do the same job, and it gets done. Not because I didn't do it, but because it got approved.
Yeah.
So that has happened a lot of times. So, but that's a different conversation for another day. But it's true, right? Like a lot of times there's that disparity of what the top people want and what the people who are actually doing the job
Need.
You're very
Need. It's not want. The
not want, you need,
perception,
exactly.
but the perception from the top is that these people just want,
Yeah,
right?
especially, and not trying to go back to what Anna said in the right beginning, especially if they come from an older generation, that is said that they say, well, they have to. I went through this, so they have to as well. When during my time, I didn't have to do it. I was like, yeah, because you had a wife that didn't work, who took care of your laundry, who took care of your food, who took care of all of your needs at home, and these people
I
have
mean,
to
it's the same
work.
generation that was getting beat with belts for punishment, and that's not going to
You
happen.
see what I'm saying? So it's like
That's
it's
not
very
acceptable
different.
today,
Yeah,
right?
it's very different, and sometimes the lack of trying to understand and see from the eyes of who it's working for you. I always tell this to my to anybody that works for me. I say they are only CEOs, and I am only a manager director because you working for me. Without you, my position doesn't exist. Neither the CEO can be CEO of nothing. So stop thinking that, you know what I'm saying? Like, and the CEOs need to understand that you only CEO because there's people below who, look, not below, but like, under with different jobs that actually are working for you.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is where the two-way communication, where as an industrial organizational psychologist, I always tell people, like, people and profit they don't have to be enemies, because when you have these two-way conversations between the executives and the staff doing the work, like, good communication and all aligning towards the same goal is only going to make you more money.
Yeah.
Well,
And there's so much
Happier people. Yeah.
research that suggests that having a collaborative approach is actually maybe not always the most productive in like those high go fast years, because we do have high go
Mhm.
fast years, but they are absolutely the most robust in the lean times.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about risk mitigation in organizations, they do not crash the way the go fast, don't listen to anybody cultures are, because they have put other trust systems in place. They've put in other communication systems in place. They have listened to their employees as consumers and really understood what and where their products are fitting the different niches. And so
Yes.
risk mitigation is a big deal. And I don't know that we talk about it enough within our concepts of what is the metric that we want to do within our cultures.
Yeah.
Yes, and risk is expensive.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know we are coming up on an hour, and you were our first to have three of us on a call. So thank you. We are already two chatty people. So before we close out, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that you didn't get a chance to because we were talking?
Oh, I enjoyed this conversation very much. So no, I don't feel like you guys talked over me or anything. Like, great. Like, I like the bounce back and the rapport. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for your time. I certainly enjoyed it and learned a lot about an industry that we don't normally get to hear about at your level of both academic and applied expertise. And I could only, I'd even get to pick your brain on the gender dynamics that have to go into safety culture when you have an all male team, and with how we,
That's a different meeting. That's a
yeah,
whole.
yeah. So
That's
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Before we close out, Raquel, is there anything you wanted to say or ask before we do?
No, it's same. Thank you for reaching out. When Anna said like, "Oh, somebody reached out," I was like, "Yes, I love empowered women that I've always said to say like I'm just gonna say it, and I think I have a great topic, which you do, and it goes along with what we talk about. So appreciate it. Thank you for being part of our small, growing
Yeah,
podcast.
growing
And
is good.
yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm glad to be back. Now we're going to be a little bit more consistent. I have a better consistency schedule as long as I don't get COVID for the fourth time. And yes, that's it. Anna, is there anything you would like to share?
No, I'm just I'm sure I'll think of a million. I'll be thinking, we do these and I think about them for a while.
Yeah. I'm a processor as well.
Yeah, and I go through the clips to put on online that you see on LinkedIn and such, and I'm sure that it'll jog more things. So open to continuing the discussion, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. We'll see you on LinkedIn.
Yes, sounds good. All right. I hate when you click